Would like to thank you, Gurudev, 'cause your children couldn't thank you enough.
All right, it's a good evening for me, afternoon, morning, wherever we are. We're a global audience. So this is the third lecture in this series of Dhyan lectures started by Paul Mason. He usually lectures the first Sunday of each month. The first lecture was very interesting. And then the next 3 weeks, we have a guest lecture. Today is going to be Roland Hartmann. I'll introduce him in a minute. And like that. And the meetings, Paul's meetings are typically 2 hours, and these meetings are typically closer to an hour, depending how it goes, how many questions, and what the um, conversation goes like. Uh, so my name is Avner Phil Kostev. Um, I'm part of the ITMA organization, the International Teachers of Meditation Association, um, and I'll be emceeing for this meeting. Roland Hartmann is a partner in ITMA. He's the chairman of ITMA, has been for a couple of years, and together he and I were fortunate to lead a teacher training academy in India approximately 2 years ago. Hopefully, we're looking at doing another one. This is a series of lectures proposed by Paul Mason about Gurudev, Maharishi, the sources of this tradition, and really it's an open subject. We can take any angle we want, and we can respond to questions and comments from the audience. We're taping them, and they're always available online on the ITMA YouTube channel. Paul has something in the Roots of TM, and so they're widely available, and there's no problem if you want to view them at a later date if these sessions are not on time. So Roland, according to my memory, I'll give a thumb sketch. He learned to meditate in South Africa and became a teacher there. He was active there many years, taught quite a few people. He was part of the early days of Meru in Europe when it was being established. And he's an architect. He set up a successful architectural firm in Vienna, mainly urban renewal. Um, and he's one of the first members of ITMA, and currently, as I said, he is the chairman of ITMA. He's taught, if I remember correctly, about 1,000 people, and and he's a dear friend. And this evening, the topic he's chosen, because it's Easter Sunday, um, to talk about parallels, the differences and parallels between two great saints. One of them, Jesus Christ, and the other is Shankara. And of course, Roland has a foot in both traditions. And if there are any comments, any requests, otherwise we'll just take a few minutes and close our eyes and meditate. Have I forgotten here? We have Paul Mason with us. Great. That will be interesting. Um, so if there are no comments, let's just take a few minutes to meditate. We'll close our eyes. This is the basis of our talk today, of these two very famous saints worldwide, East and West, probably based on this same simple experience. So Roland, would you like to unmute and
Thank you, Avner, for the introduction, and welcome everybody from my side as well. I'm very happy and privileged to give a talk on a topic which is, pretty challenging. First of all, once more shortly, I was initiated in 1971 and became teacher in 1974. And now I'm living in Graz in Austria. And I'm having the great joy to welcome also Paul Mason once more, as Abner did, and David, and all other friends here, and all you who are attending this. Let's say on Easter Sunday, this topic seems to be something special, since Easter and Easter Sunday we can't just ignore if we want to meet and talk about meditation, because the Easter Sunday is it's a very great holiday, a great holy day at least for the Christianity. And as I said, we can't ignore it. I don't want to ignore it. And so I dive into this topic as I usually do or did when I was giving a project by someone as an architect to design a house or something like this. And the first I do is a draft. So today I'm making a draft. I'm not making the finished building already. It would be too much. I'm not a scientist in regards of all these historical events we are going to talk about now, but it's a draft, and I'm inviting you to come along with me along these lines, that we are improvising and seeking the traces of Jesus and Shankara. Jesus and Shankara especially, since we started to meditate, the transcendental or transcending form of meditation and of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, we were taught, and later on, and now we know better that it's very old meditation type, goes back to Swami Brahmananda Saraswati and all this tradition. Also, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati is one of the last personalities of that tradition, which goes back right to the first Shankara, the Adi Shankara Charya, and Jesus and Shankara. Jesus and Shankara, the Adi Shankara. Now, Adi Shankara is born, he lived around about the time of Muhammad. It's very interesting to have noticed, approximately. Now, other scholars say, though he was living 300, 400 years before that time turn. So the sciences are not very clear on that, but that's not what is bothering us today. More the scientists say it's more that Shankara lived after Jesus in the 16th, 7th century, and he enjoyed his life, yet it was not a very long life, and that's very interesting. He just had about 32 years to live, and we know Jesus, he lived not more than 33 to 35 years. That's what we are celebrating now, more or less. That he died on the cruise. He was crucified in his 35th or 33rd year, and he had a kind of violent death, so to say, and this is what makes the great difference, the first difference to Shankara. But when Jesus, now we don't need to go too much into detail of Jesus, because we all know anyway how all these days were happening for Jesus, these more than 2,000 years ago. But to have this comparison with Shankara, it's very interesting that Shankara at the same time also lived not many more years, just 32 years. And then what happened to Shankara? Shankara was in his 32nd year at the Himalaya, at a village or a spot named, we all know, the Kedarnath in Himalaya, at the foot of the Himalaya, and where he just walked off into the mountains and disappeared. There's no trace of him. There's a temple though there, but it's not certain that he is buried there. He just vanished. Not he vanished. Not now. He walked up furthermore into the mountains and was not seen anymore. He thought, due to the literature I got from the southern seat of the Shankaracharyas in Sringeri Math, when I was there in 2023, that he had done all the work, the job he had done, and he was kind of finished with this job. And so he had provided all the literature necessary to reform whatever in his eyes needed to be reformed in those years, in this cultural setting India was in. Now, I started off with the death because Jesus, just to give Jesus the credit of this Easter Sunday, usually we start off with the birthday and what he was, somebody was learning and studying and all this. So we turned it a little bit, allowed myself to turn it a little bit around. But now I'm coming to the more younger years of the two of them. Shankara was, when he was a young boy, he didn't want to become a family man. So he somehow managed with his parents to become a sannyasi, a brahmachari. At the age of 12, he went into at the age of 9, and so he started there to study already with some very famous saints and scholars in India, and he proved to be very, very intelligent. And this is, we know from Jesus as well. He was a young man when he was at the temple and discussed Talmud with the learned exponents in the temple. So after this, and he there were no much, let's say, there is from Jesus at least, there are no traces. We don't know where he was spending his life, about 12 years or so, or no more, 20 years, because the whole story of Jesus starts with approximately 32 or something like this. And in between, we just can guess what he was doing, where he was living. So there's a great riddle. And so we don't need to wonder that some people think in this time he was traveling to India. Now, we don't want to exclude this, this argument, but he also could have been just stayed around in the area where he was growing up, but he just made his traditional way of life, and then, but he kind of also could have gone into the desert to live there as a monk and to learn what we know a yogi would learn, since in those days we can imagine, and we have to imagine, that the connection or the communication between these two areas of the Roman Empire and the Indian continent was possible, was very active, rather active. Trade was happening there, and the trade was going via sea as well as via land. Don't forget, Alexander the Great was moving with his army right up to the border of India and the Indus part, And at that time, who was there ruling? It was a huge Buddhist state. And the most famous king of that was Ashoka. And he had expanded his kingdom quite almost over the whole of the continent of India. And we know India is a huge continent, and it means quite something to rule such a huge country. And so there was a communication, and we know there are some communication between the Greeks and the Indian kings and the representatives of the Buddhist country of Ashoka. And there are some books as well there, and I've got it even one in my library. And so it shows that there was some communication between these two areas. So it's not such a strange idea that Jesus picked up something of that, and that's why we can say, at least the idea to have some kind of spiritual path, a spiritual life beginning. We can say Jesus, in these years where we have no records of his life, took place. And when he came back to Jerusalem, or to Judea and these areas, he was a fully developed saint. That's what we know from the Bible and from other records. So in those years, he developed more or less what we know from our meditation practice, God consciousness and unity consciousness. And from that level, he began to teach as a wandering saint in his country with all what we know. Parallel to that, 700 years later, more or less, Shankara, when he showed up on the planet, he, as I said before, was changed. He chose to live the life of a celibate already in boyhood, and so he kind of investigated that also by spending 12 years in silence. He was sitting, of his 32 years, he spent 12 years in silence. We know from Maharishi, he was spending 2 years at the Himalaya when Swami Ramananda Saraswati has gone. And later on, he spent 12 days at the beginning of every year in silence. So Shankara made his own test of what's happening during when he is kind of settling his and experiencing and exploring the silence of the consciousness. And so it's not just an intellectual phenomenon. He also expounded or he became an exponent of the so-called non-duality, the Advaita, or unity consciousness scope we know. And by this, he started to write some commentaries, some very famous commentary. We know from the puja, we cite what he was writing. No? He was writing the commentary on the Brahma Sutra, and he also wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita of sage Vyasa. And he had, when he was going to roam around from South India, where he was born, in Kerala, at the area, at the little place called Kaladi, where we have coincidentally have started our teacher training course when we arrived there in 2023. And he kind of developed a great intellectual competence by writing all this literature and became very famous. So what he was winning in these years, he won four disciples. We all know when we do the puja or when we hear the puja, they are by name Hastamalaka, Padmapada, Vartikakara, and Trotaka. And on the other side, Jesus had 12 apostles. Of those 12 apostles, at least one of them, it was Thomas. He went to India. And and he went to Kerala. He went to Kerala where Shankara was having the life of as a young man. And there, the apostle Thomas was quite busy in winning some people to become Christians. And when we were there, and when I was traveling with Bob to the country of Kerala, we observed quite a few, not just few, quite many churches. Not the very old one, the old one from 2,000 years ago, they just have vanished. But nowadays, there are so many churches there, and it was surprising how many Christians are living in Kerala, or many Indians who turned themselves to Christianity. So this is a trace. We can see that when Shankara was living, he must have noticed that there are Christians in his environment because he was a learned man. But he didn't contact them anyway. But still, his goal was, and that's very interesting, and I'll come back to Jesus. The goal of Shankara was, he wanted to reform the Indian religious culture. Not that in our eyes today there was a great need, but he thought it's necessary because what we have learned is that he turned the Indian society, which was in the late phase of Buddhism. He kind of persuaded them with his engagement in the commentaries of all these famous topics of the Vedas, that they shouldn't abstain from the very old Vedic literatures. And the very old literatures show that there is also God. And that was his task. He wanted to show the people of India again that it's not good to follow this idea of Buddha that there are no gods. Now, we don't want to make now for ourselves an opinion here. It's not our task. We just talk about the phenomenon, what was happening there then. Buddha, we know yet that in Buddha's belief, and we have all friends in Buddhist communities. Even my sister is one of Buddhists in a Buddhist group, and we always have some fine discussions. Oh, you are a Hindu and you believe in gods, and I say no, it's we're just meditating, and so jokingly. But so this was the point, was that Shankara was trying to bring up again the old roots of the Indian culture, which was in the Vedic time and prior to Buddha. So that's what happened. And why was it possible? Because we know the Shankara, the Ashoka kingdom was long gone ago already, about 800 or 900 years. And after 900 years, any kind of kingdom, any kind of ideology has, like here, a beginning phase, a strong phase, and an ending, weaker phase. So Shankara came up when the Buddhism in India was in a kind of weak phase. Even though there were scholars and universities in the very big cities, but the people were tired. Now there's a reason to that, and that's what I see. The reason was in Buddhism they give a strong point of being monks or nuns, and this presence, this priority of monk's life and nun's life didn't help very much the householder's way of life. Now we can talk about these countries where Buddhism is strong, like in Bhutan or in Tibet. Well, Tibet not, but in Thailand and all the others. But that was in those days the case, and so it was not so strange that somebody turned up like Shankara and gave the Indian culture, the Indian people, back again the roots of their own culture, their own old values, which we know to be the Vedic times. Like what is it? We all know not just the big, the huge stories of King Rama and all this, which contains also the Bhagavad Gita, So what I want to say is Shankara started to move around the country. He started off in the south, in the Theravada area, region, where the language was not Hindu. It was the Dravidic language. And so he started to walk and wander to the north and to the west and to the east. And by this, he kind of avoided the big cities, as I could read in the literature in Sringeri. And by this, he kind of could persuade, or could win the ears of the people. And that's the way how his engagement become a very powerful one. I'm reminded of, let's say, Luther. I'm jumping from A to Z. Now Luther also, he turned up at the time of Christianity, of Catholic Christianity, when the Catholic Christianity was not at the top of its best moral or ethic values. And so his message to the people became very successful. Somehow, apparently, without knowing the facts, John Sketting, as I just said, it's a sketch. Now it's a draft. But he found the people there, they wanted to listen to him. And they were prepared, they were open, and they listened to him. And so Shankara was becoming successful in teaching the old identity of the Indian culture to the people. What happened at the same time is that he also practiced healing power. We know it from the cities. The healing power he was addressing to the people there roaming around in India, just like Jesus when he was roaming around in Galilee. Jesus was, simply said, a great yogi. He had these powers. he had these city powers, I dare to say. And he applied them for the well-being of the people whenever he was asked. And so he also not just had this aura around him to create peace around himself, but he also applied his ability, his city abilities, power for personal healing. And that was Shankara doing as well. It's surprising how many healings Shankara was applying. Now, what happened when Shankara was having his conversations and disputations also with great exponents everywhere in the country where he was moving around? He found that in order to have his engagement a lasting effect, he had to establish something organizing, some sort of organizing an organized feature. And that what he was doing is he set up with his 4 disciples 4 seats of Shankara. They were called Shankara Charyas, and he said to have this effect, a longer effect in the whole of the country, of the subcontinent of India, there need to be some seat in the north, another seat in the west, another seat in the east, and another seat in the south. Now we had the luck, we had the privilege to see and meet the seat in the south in Sringeri, the Sringeri Mutt. And this, what we found when we were there with Bob and Volkmar from Germany, that they were doing the same puja as we were learning. It was such a, we knew it in theory, but it was fact. They were doing the same puja, the same text. And so it was a proof that not only in the northern seat, where Brahmananda Saraswati was the head of when he was living in his last 15 years, but also in the south. So we can assume also in the eastern seats and in the western seats of the Shankaracharya, they consider the same tradition, and as it was started with Shankara. This is parallel by Jesus, so to say, when Jesus found that when at his Last Supper, or even a little bit earlier, he had to have a lasting effect. So he said to one of his 12 apostles, I think it was Paul, St. Paul, that he is the rock I'm building my church on. And he was the one, please correct me, he was the one who was wandering to Rome. And
Peter means rock. That's why it was his rock.
That's why. Thank you.
Peter.
And so in this person of Peter, when he was traveling the Roman Empire in those days, he missioned the people, and he also built this first address as a kind of administrative center. It was not Jerusalem, interestingly enough. It was Rome. And he knew if he wanted to win the world where he was living in, the Roman world, then it had to be in the capital of this empire, in Rome. So it happened to be the Apostle Peter, and this is what we know from today. Yes, we are living in whatever we know. When we go to Rome, there's the St. Peter's Dome, and we enjoy the presence, the living, the vitality of this Christian tradition, of Catholic tradition in Rome. And this is the result of that. Just like in India, the 4 seats. Now, when we want to understand, once more, how was it possible that Jesus and Shankara were sharing more or less quite some things. And that is, yes, even in those days, as I said, beginning with Alexander the Great, and even most probably earlier, but consequently also later on, the Greeks and the other merchants, Arabian merchants, Egyptian merchants, Indian merchants, they traveled back and forth between the Roman Empire and the Indian subcontinent. And they were not just trading with physical goods like silk and whatever, but they also brought along literature. They brought along knowledge. They brought along the mathematic knowledge, for example, because we know the mathematics, as we know, is a great science in India. Was a great science in India, and the knowledge came via the Arabs to Europe. And we now say already the Arabs founded the zero. In fact, it was the Indians who discovered the zero as part of the number system. Now, this is what we have today, that these great saints were sharing quite some stories and quite some presence in their life. I'd like to thank you for your polite attention, and I would like to invite you, if you have got something to say and add or correct, please come along.
Well, thank you, Roland. It was a very interesting comparison and talk, lots of details I at least was not aware of. I think Paul has a few comments, at least on the Shankara side. Paul, would you like to join? Paul, you have to unmute yourself.
Yep, I'm unmuted. Hi, thank you, Roland, for bringing up all the points that you have about the life of Shankara and about Jesus. There's so much more that one could say about Jesus, the connections between Jesus and India. There's a whole backstory that some people believe that he didn't actually die on the cross, that he was restored through the use of herbs. That's why he was taken back to that tomb and given so much herbal treatment. It wasn't to embalm him, it was to revive him, and that he actually survived the experience and went and lived in India. But that's a whole topic in itself. Why I wanted to raise the topic about Shankara is that when I did my research into Adi Shankara for my last talk about Gurudev, is that I discovered that all the maths of India, the monasteries of the Shankara tradition, actually claim pretty much the same sort of date, which is that he lived somewhere about 2,500 years ago. The date given by the Jyotirmath monastery is 485 BC. The one from Dwarka is 491 BC, and the other two are very similar. The other point I wanted to make about Shankara is that you mentioned that he raised the topic of gods. Well, basically, in India, there's a great belief system in the existence, the multiple existence of Devata. Um, there's so many stories told to children about the activities of a divine world. You can't really be born into the India of the past without knowing all this. And of course, Shankara knew that. So when he came to minister, he had he actually had a very similar objective as Jesus did, or is supposed to have done from the records that we have, is that he wanted to simplify. He wanted to show his audience, if you want, for a better word, his congregation. He wanted to bring them back to themselves. He wanted to bring, like with this word advaita. It's without a sense of duality, without a sense of that and me or him and me. It's a question of, like we find with our meditations, is that we go beyond limitation, beyond our own individual identity. We find a higher identity, which in Indian parlance is called Paramatma, which is, one could say, self with a capital S, rather than the self that we normally think about, which is definitely a smaller self, since there's so many. What I'm trying to point out is that I think that Shankara and Jesus had a common perspective, is that they were trying to simplify and show to people that they could believe in anything they wanted to, but when it came down to it, when it came down to the experience, that they could return within themselves. And Jesus is credited for saying, seek the kingdom of heaven within, and all else will be added unto you. And that's pretty much that is the yogic expression. And the yogic expression comes through the Shankaracharya tradition. So I think the real link, for me anyway, between Shankara and Jesus is that they were both reformers. And they were reformers not just jiggling about with the religion, but they were actually trying to bring the adherents of those religions back to an inner spiritual experience. And I think that regardless of when Shankara lived, regardless of the historical details of either of them, that was what we inherit as what they were trying to do, which, in a sense, without deifying Maharishi or Gurudev, is what they were trying to do too. They had the same task. And while we're talking about the comparisons, Gurudev left home when he was 9, but he survived his 30s and he went on and got to a grand age. But anyway, thank you for your talk, and I hope you don't mind me raising these extra points. Thank you, Roland.
Thank you. It's fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul.
If I can throw in a few points.
Please do. We're a small group. Just go.
Yeah, I can't see who's there. I can't show my face right now because I was out of town overnight, forgot my battery charger. My phone died right as Roland started speaking, so I missed about 10 minutes of your talk. So I don't know if you covered some of the things I want to talk about. But I have to leave the phone flat on the charger right now. So a couple of points I wanted to bring up. For one thing, I really don't like using the word Jesus. Jesus is a Greek name that was applied in the 4th century when Emperor Constantine put together the religion we now call Christianity. Before that, he was called by his Aramaic name, Yeshua. So I always refer to him as Yeshua. Now, back in my college years, I was practicing TM regularly, but exploring a lot of different spiritual paths. And I did study Rosicrucian teachings for a couple of years. went through the first two initiations in the Rosicrucian order. And they talk a lot about Yeshua. And they talk about how his family is part of the Essene religion, which it was a sect that existed in Israel. They were Jewish by blood, Jewish by culture, practiced all of the Jewish traditions and such, but their spirituality really was based on the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. And according to the Rosicrucians, both Mary and Joseph, I don't remember their Aramaic names, but at birth, their astrology charts indicated that they were going to give birth to a very high spiritual being who could become the leader of the Egyptian mystery school. And so they were paired. And before they even consummated their union, Yeshua was immaculately conceived. But he passed through all of the degrees of the Essene teachings by the time he reached the age of 12, which was unheard of. And so at that point, they sent him to Egypt, where he then ascended through the highest degrees of the Egyptian mystery schools, also in a very rapid time. But he was dissatisfied spiritually. And so he traveled east. And I also read a lot of several books from different Indian sources say that Yeshua settled in the area called Kashmir for a while, lived in Tibet for a while, and actually traveled the entire continent of India. And it's known that he studied a lot of Buddhist teachings as well as Hindu bhakti teachings. And there's no record, but I would assume that he had met the Shankaracharyas as well. And we know that he kind of formulated his own path by the time he reached enlightenment around the age of 30, and then returned to Israel to give his teachings. But it seems his teachings are a blending of the Buddhist teachings of oneness, as well as the personal bhakti, devotional teachings of the bhakti sects. And I don't know if you touched on any of that, Roland, but
No.
I know in one of my future trips to India, I planned on going to Kashmir. There's a small temple in Kashmir that's said to be the tomb of Yeshua or Jesus. It's said that after the crucifixion, and as Paul said, he used these meditation techniques, healing techniques, and verbal healing they got from the mystery schools to heal himself after the crucifixion. But they say that then he traveled to Kashmir, where he lived till almost 100 years of age. And I really do want to visit that temple at some point. But I just wanted to throw in those little points as well.
Well,
Thank you,
I
Bob.
don't. Sorry.
It's always great to hear you. You're such a treasure house of all these spiritual stories. Anyone else would like to make a comment, ask a question?
Maybe I can add a few historical notions to reinforce what Roland was saying, if some people want to hear it.
Yeah, go ahead, Carmelo.
Thank you. So, as those of you who know me, you know that I'm both a practicing Buddhist and a practicing Christian. And the relationship between Rome and India is definitely under-evaluated. Even before Rome, since at least Alexander the Great, but probably even before. And I just wanted to cite two things. I was surprised when visiting, the only time I visited the Museum of Pompeii, that there is a thing called the Lakshmi of Pompeii. It is a statuette about size of, I don't know, less than a meter, 80 centimeters in wood, and it is a statue of Lakshmi. Obviously shows that there was a Brahminic presence in Pompeii, an important commercial city of the Roman Empire in the Italian peninsula. Before that, we have Plato that mentions Socrates talking to his students and saying, let's meet outside the city walls by the Brahmin cemetery. So we had an entire cemetery that was actually a Brahmin cemetery outside the city walls of Athens in the 4th century before Christ. So there was much more communication than we expect, than we believe today. So the thesis that Jesus fulfilled his learning in India is absolutely coherent, conceivable. I wanted to add another thing about the relationship between the divine and humanity. I was not familiar with Shankara. So thank you very much, Roland. I learned a lot, even while you were sitting around with Wikipedia and other things. And very interesting, fascinating stories. I will say this, and then I will ask you a question. So I try to talk about the transition from pure divinity and pure mortality as two separate elements, and how different figures manage to merge the two worlds. And I usually use the form of Krishna, who was born of a mortal woman and had a lot such as playing with the butterball or stealing the clothes of the gopis. He was a naughty little child growing up and was full of joy. Then I talk about, obviously, Buddha, who was full mortal but reached enlightenment. And finally, Christ, who was also born of a mortal but was, in every sense, a incarnation of God. The thing that I find fascinating is if we already had this knowledge about consciousness being the element that precedes, girdles, and outlives all the physical universe, and we already had complete teachings, especially Buddha, who did a wonderful job of how to overcome the limits of the physical world through the practice of meditation, through the practice of the teachings, his teaching, the Buddha. Why did the Christ have to come again and show us how to endure this through his sufferings? And I have a rather witty formula. I say Buddha is just like Christ without the drama. But unfortunately, we being human beings, we need the drama. Otherwise, we don't think it is important. We don't appreciate it. And so for me, Christ is somebody that took it upon himself to demonstrate to us that we need not fear the suffering of this world because the true world is beyond. So this was my comment. My question instead is much more simple. Is there a lineage, a relationship? You said that you found the same prayers. So if Guru Dev is somehow a descendant of Shankara.
Paul, Roland, would you like to answer?
Once more, the last question, Carmelo.
So you mentioned that you found that the same initiation prayers that we practice from the Maharishi tradition, which means Guru Dev, found in these Shankaracharya, the Shankara temples. So Guru Dev is it from the lineage of Shankara, his teachings?
Yes, yes. This is what proved us when we were in Sringeri, in the southern Shankaracharya Mat, just a little bit north of Kerala, at the northern tip. And we were in the library there, and we couldn't carry big books with us because of the weight in our luggage, but we bought some small booklets. And in these booklets, we could see and read, I can read the text and the same saints, starting off with the Turtakach and the other three disciples of Shankaracharya. And the whole story of Shankara is very detailed, displayed in these booklets. And there is this citing of the names of these saints right from the beginning, like Narayanam, and starting with Narayanam, and this was not just so. This was written there, black and white, and maybe some nuances have been different, but when we were listening to the offerings of the present living Shankaracharya, it was the same puja. I mean, a puja is a common kind of ceremonial act in the whole of India, but he was doing the same rituals. Now, Bob, you will most probably remember also very good what we were listening to.
So it is fair to say that the tradition of Itma is at least 1,500 years old.
Itma is 3 or 4 years old, but it's
But you continue a tradition that is from Shankara.
We are rooted in the Shankaracharya tradition. We are rooted in the Shankaracharya tradition, which the personality of Shankaracharya Saraswati of the northern seat, North India, he was representing the northern seat of the Shankaracharya seat after 35 years of having been invited, and after 165 vacancy of the seat. And the role of, now this is going to another direction, but let's just consider this. Swami Brahmananda Saraswati was in an area when India was ruled by foreign people overall. If we like it or not, the British rule over the subcontinent of India for the Indians was a rule of foreign people, a foreign power. No matter whether they've been Muslims or Hindus or whatever. And in this area, apparently, before Shankaracharya, now, Paul, you can please correct me, but that's what I gauge is my historical understanding of this time, that it was about time that somebody came up to fill in and take the seat of the northern Shankaracharya, because it was very important that this seat is not vacant anymore. And it somehow happened that India became independent in that area when Shankaracharya Saraswati was the Shankara of the seat of the northern mat of Jyotirmat. But at the same time, on the other mats, the mats were always, not always, but most of the time, they had persons presenting the seats.
And coming back to the actual age of Adi Shankara, as I said in my talk a couple of weeks ago, Adi actually means the first.
Yes.
And Shankar or Shankaracharya is, the living Shiva, and Acharya means teacher. So when historians try to determine a history for Shankara, what they find is that there's multiple Shankaras, actually tons and tons and tons of them, and they figure out, this one was born in this time, therefore that's when Adi Shankara was born. Okay, and so that's why we have these different versions, but the actual monasteries themselves say that they're in the area of 2,500 years ago. And I think for our purposes, I think we should adopt their viewpoint, because that was the viewpoint that Guru Dev adopted, and he was the authority of that particular tradition. But he wasn't in conflict with the Shankaracharyas in the West, East, or South. They say pretty much the same. 1 year's difference between Jyotirmath and Puri, for instance, 6 years difference with Dwarka. It's completely not relevant. But I think we need to take that on board and realize that Adi means the first.
Yes.
That it's very easy for historians to kind of conjure up versions of that, as we still do. I mean, it's still a hot potato who the Shankaracharya of the North is. And, you know, it's as it always has been. As I said in my talk, there were succession disputes even before Gurudev took the post. I don't know if I talked about it much. It'll be in my book. But other people were sort of saying, no, I'm the Shankaracharya. I mean, like, you could do that. You could put on a gown and you could put on markings and you could claim to be the Shankaracharya. And that's how it goes. And it's an important post. Now, the point that you made was it significant that Gurudev took the job of being Shankaracharya when he did? Well, bear in mind, he was offered 33 years before he actually accepted it, and they didn't put somebody else in that position. They did offer it to Swami Kalpatri, but they didn't actually put anybody else in that seat. So they wanted the right person. Now, you wonder if it's significant that the Shankaracharya was Gurudev and that there was the independence. There were links. He was a highly politicized religious figure, was Gurudev. He wasn't just peace and love and quietude. He was quite animated about his belief about the politics of India, that the politics of India should reflect the spiritual aspirations of Sanatana Dharma. He was completely unequivocal about that. And he, with his primary disciple, Kalpatri, were very, very vocal. Kalpatri was a very loud voice in the independence movement, the getting rid of the British. Let's make no mistake about it. He was a very loud voice. Their whole ashram was a loud voice in that. They were against what they called the Hindu code, which were attempts to revise law in India and make them more Western, if you want. And they were being raised by Indians as well. It wasn't, you know, we talk about the British rule and that, but there were many, many Indians who wanted those changes and kept those changes and still want those changes. It's not just about the British, it's a mindset that we all share, Americans, Europeans, everybody. We're all modernists. Gurudev was not a modernist. He wanted things to be anything other than modern. And one thing he wanted was that India returns to being, you know, true to Vedic tradition. He wasn't trying to get other people to be Hindus. He wasn't reaching out and saying, all you French people and all you Canadians should be Hindu. He just wanted India to be as true to Sanatana Dharma as it could possibly be. And he was a very vocal proponent of that idea, and he was very influential. There's no doubt about it. He was very, very influential. And Kalpatri was as influential, if not more, and he was his primary disciple. So when they did this huge peace yajna in Delhi, it was big news. This hasn't been done for hundreds of years. We, these inhabitants of India, can change the world's atmosphere by our rituals. It's a really significant idea, and one that's still in the air. Like, we as Westerners are very skeptical about the power of belief and of the power of rituals. We accept the value of meditation because to a large extent it's been proved to us. not least by our own experience of it. But it's another thing to say, lighting this fire, putting this ghee on it, putting these spices and herbs will produce this in the atmosphere, will produce coherence. Well, you know, we're, me included, we're a bit skeptical. But Gurudev wasn't skeptical in the slightest, and he shuffled off any idea that there could be any skepticism. And he infected his fellow man with a great sense of urgency to getting back to those values. So, in short, to answer your question, yeah, it was significant that he was the Shankaracharya. It's not just a coincidence. It's not just a sort of way of saying, oh, it was kind of like we can give him a medal for that because he was around, but he didn't do anything. He did do a lot. I mean, the ashram newspaper was talking about the Hindu code. It wasn't just talking about peace and love. It was talking politics, you know.
Okay, Paul,
Roland.
thank you for your very interesting comment about Avner. I'm taking over another moderation. Now, Avner, you want to say something?
So, these talks are supposed to be around about an hour. So I think this is a great time to wrap off. I know we could go on for another 2-3 hours, but we wanted this structure to have the first one in the month go for 2 hours or more, much deeper. And I think some of these questions, especially Carmelo's point about what's the difference between Maharishi's meditation and Gurudev's meditation. I think, Paul, you were going to speak about that later on in the series.
Yeah, I think I need to be able to have a sort of little bit of a kind of introduction to that. I won't be able to just say, oh, well, we've come to compare these. I've been thinking about it and say, I think we have to kind of look at the whole subject of meditation before we start comparing theirs.
Yeah,
But I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
So are we all. So we'll wrap up now. Roland, why don't you say some summing up words, and we'll meet next Sunday at the same hour, same place.
Yes, I'm very, very glad that we had this day today, the Easter Sunday, talking about this very kind of, not controversial, but kind of strange connectedness between these two saints, if I may call Joshua, as you, Paul, want to say, Joshua, and Shankara, Adi Shankara, yes, with the pronunciation of Adi Shankara from Kerala, from Kaladi, because Shankara is a common name, yeah, but it also means, now I've read it up, it's a name of Lord Shiva, and it means the doer of good. I've been reading, and so it's been a beautiful occasion to find some of our, when I look into our audience, then most of us have been grown up in a kind of Christian atmosphere, so to say, at least, or in a Judaism atmosphere, and not in an Indish, in an Indian atmosphere, but we have caught interest by the practice of our meditation, and we have been diving into the representatives of this meditation form, and Bhavatit Dhyam, I may take this term now, and I'm very glad that I've been privileged to give this talk to you, my friends. Thank you very much from my side. And Jai Gurudev, I'm looking forward for the next talk.
Jai Gurudev. See you all.